Hi, I'm David. It's always hard to start, isn't it? Uh, I'm starting this video as a series for June 2020 because last year before Christmas J.K. Rowling came out in favour of a very unpleasant transphobe, and aside from all of the other discourse, and it's still rude as hell online right now, I felt really sad because as a trans man, I now know I'm not welcome in her fandom, or at least her universe. I'm sure there are enclaves of Harry Potter fans who are like, you're welcome, but knowing that the author doesn't consider me a person, doesn't consider me worthy of inclusion, it just makes me sad. And in the process of my sort of feeling sad and actually feeling a lot more sorry for people who are younger than me, whose childhood and teen years were, encapsulated in the Harry Potter universe, it must be so hard. I felt sorry for them. On Twitter there were sort of waves of people asking for references, links to authors and books that were inclusive, because now that it's definitely established that she's not friendly to people like myself and other trans folk, they were looking for safe fiction for authors who are inclusive and not, secret transphobes, or at least not obvious transphobes. And the problem with being a New Zealander is it's really hard because you're taught not to go, look at me, look at me, look at me, haha. You're taught that bragging is really rude. And I tried to promote my books, TSU, my universe, Time Speaker universe, but it felt all icky, it's kind of car salesman, used car salesman, Ugh. So I had this idea of doing a video series describing, showing, introducing not only the Time Speaker universe just as a story to people, but to actually go through some of the major structures, deliberate structural designs that I put into the universe in order to make it as inclusive as possible. Just to give you some scale, I actually started writing in the Time Speaker universe, started creating it 21 years ago, 1999. I started writing the first version of Time Speaker, which was originally the first book. So I've been thinking about this and researching and learning and trying desperately to just understand all of the sort of the big ideas and how to apply them, and approaching my own internal biases, and it's hard to try and design these things because you can't design them properly unless you approach your own internal stuff. But I wanted a promotional type thing to be less about me and more actually about the structure, the story, the characters in TSU. I've always felt like I was creating it, but I felt like I was sort of channeling another intention, like the universe desperately needed the Time Speaker universe to exist, and so it was poking me to do it. I didn't feel like it was entirely mine, if you know what I mean. If that sounds a bit too supernatural, I don't know. I wrote because writing kept me safe, kept me calm, helped me get through really horrible things. So I'm always going to write, whether other people read it or not. But it has been designed to be as inclusive as possible. There will be limitations because I'm one person, I can make mistakes, I have my own internal biases, but I've done my best. And I think it's ready to start promoting, to start letting people understand what's gone into the creation of the Time Speak universe, how detailed, how kind of Lord of the Rings-esque it is as a shape, as an actual fictional universe. It's huge with lots of myths and legends and histories and planets and just so much, including very deliberate structural designs for inclusion, for being that fictional universe where people can be safe, where people won't be rejected like they are in society. So I've decided to structure these videos in order of, but essentially the order that I actually designed them in. So this first video will be basically about sexism, or the lack, or trying to make a lack of sexism in TSU, which I did early on, which is why there is now I'm just about to give you a disclaimer. A lot of these ideas, the design that I did to avoid sexism, or to take sexism out, or imagine a place without sexism, was in a time where I didn't know about different sexes. I barely even knew there was more than, gay and straight. This was in the early 2000s when I did a lot of this design, and so while I've tried to add to it as I learned more about intersectional feminism and newer ideas and stuff, but some of the core ideas revolve around, firstly, the idea that there's only women and men, which I apologise. I've tried to change as much as I could, but for example, if I say woman, and it's an issue that I'm talking about that probably applies to all people assigned female at birth, or also includes trans women, or non-binary, or non-cisgender woman, but it applies to not just cisgender women, please just assume that I've got the big disclaimer after the word woman. It's really hard to, what do you say is an inclusive noun? Not men? Which doesn't really help because I'm a man, but I'm affected by sexism. I haven't got all the terms yet. So for my plan, for all my notes and stuff, I have used the word woman, but I mean it in an inclusive way that includes everyone who would otherwise be affected because society calls them a woman for whatever reason, whether it's appearance or gender assigned at birth, or all of those things, because it's too hard to, every time you say woman, add a bunch of disclaimers. So please forgive me. I'm going to do my best, and I'm probably going to screw it up. So I'm not trying to be an asshole. So the thing that I tell almost everyone who will listen is that the TSU vision is to create a fictional universe which is a sanctuary for everyone who experiences systemic oppression. I don't know how well I've met that vision, but that is my vision, my creation vision for TSU. That was my vision before TSU existed. That was a vision I had when I was 15 or 16, and I decided, yeah, I want to be a writer. Every time someone said on Twitter, hey, we're devastated about JK being definitely a transphobe, we need a new fictional universe. Every single time I saw that, I'm like, TSU, TSU. And sometimes I did actually go, here, try my book. But it is the answer. Whether it answers well or not isn't actually for me to define, but it's my intention to be that answer, to create a universe that helps and is accepting and inclusive of everyone who are currently being oppressed by bigots and stuff around the world. The thing is, trying to create this sort of world is really hard, really complicated, because you have to understand the issues before you can design a universe without it, if you know what I mean. So I'm going to be starting these videos off with a question, which is, what would a society look like without this particular bigotry? So the question for this is, what would society look like without sexism? I don't know about you, but that's firstly an amazing idea, and also initially it's hard to imagine something that you haven't experienced. And the more research you do into feminism, you realize that it's not just being treated like a man, or as equally as a man. The dynamics are a lot more complicated than just treated like a man, because it's like the trope with the strong female character. What they did with the strong female character that turned it into a trope was, what they did, they just took a male hero and made him female. They gave her all the same aggressive problems, all the same sort of, let's hit it first, sort of barbarian like responses to things. This is a problem, I should hit it. They didn't actually bring the nuance. They didn't bring different ideas within. They didn't make a strong heroine character from womanhood or femininity or anything. All they did was clone the male idea of a hero, and then essentially added tits and skin and hair, which sounds really gross. They didn't bring the nuance of different identities, different personalities. It was just cardboard creation. It wasn't a person, those characters. They weren't nuanced, because we're all different. We're not cookie cutter people. And that's the problem with bigotry. Bigotry expects us to be cookie cutter people. We have to fit these particular definitions, these particular behavioural patterns, these particular interests, or we're not right. And then you get violence or bullying or oppression, essentially. So when I was doing research into lots of feminist issues and definitions and ideas, and I tend to sort of research like crazy, shove it all in my brain, chew on it for a little while, and then spit out ideas. But in my research phases, I came across the idea that feminism isn't about equality or living or being allowed to live as a man. I mean, not in a trans way, I just mean rights way. To have all the rights and opportunities and jobs as a man, like try and replace men. What it actually is fighting to have more choices. And I like that idea of equality being less necessarily about rights, at least emotionally. It's about freedom. It's about having choices and not having those choices taken from you. And the brilliant idea, the brilliant side effect of this concept of feminism not being about replacing men, but actually about freedom, proper freedom, is that when you free women, you also free men. You free everyone. regardless of gender. And I know that probably sounds a bit strange, but stick with me. The thing is, sexism is in relation, like, sexism is about essentially enslaving women to men's sexual needs. That seems to be the core sort of, men must dominate, must own women for sex and babies, essentially. I mean, it's a vulgar description, but that's what it seems to be the core of. It's dominance and ownership. But the thing is, the boxes people put women into, or try to put women into, there's lots of people fighting back, which is awesome, but those boxes have a mirror image for men. Men have to be strong. Men have to be angry rather than sad or vulnerable. If a man doesn't fit in his box, he's not allowed to be a man. He's a wuss, or whatever other word, because that's the only one I actually remember hearing as a kid. But he gets punished in a different way, and often much, much less severe. And if anyone wants to tell me that what women get isn't as severe as what men get, have obviously not been raped. I have been there. I would rather be killed, actually. But men get stuck in this box, and it's a reflection of the woman's box. Women have to do this and that and this and that, and they have to look this way, and they have to be sexy and beautiful and thin and blah blah blah. But men also are forced to be strong, not to be vulnerable, not to be weak. Everything has to be about their genitals or their ego or dominance or stomping on people, breaking things, and very barbarian. The trope of the barbarian, smacking everything. There's no room in that box for men to just be themselves. And so when you free women, that freedom reflects for men. Because if it's not shameful to be a woman, you can't use femininity to punish men or to tell men what they're not allowed to do or be or whatever. And while I definitely think feminism needs to focus on women's freedom, because it's pretty awful out there, and women tend to be they have the less power, so they need the most fighting for, if you know what I mean. We need to stand up and focus on feminism, but there is the upside that it would actually free everyone from these gendered boxes that are actually almost wholly arbitrary. So the thing is, when we try and make a universe where there isn't sexism, one of the first things that's easy to take away is the gendered violence, the supremacy, the dominance. So if you try and imagine a universe where men and women are not, there isn't a power differential. One isn't better than the other, one isn't stronger or more powerful or whatever. There isn't a power differential. So there's no ownership, there's no entitlement. There would be no incels ever in TSU, because no one is entitled to someone else's body, regardless of what they do or do not have, or the shape of their body, or their gender, or gender expression, or anything. Everyone would have equal body autonomy. No one would be entitled to anyone else, and no one's mindset would be set in getting their identity from dominating others. So there'd automatically be less bullies in the world, which is awesome. So there's all these effects that are all linked. It's amazing how linked everything is, actually. So some of the side effects of taking just the dominance and the supremacy away, sex wouldn't be shameful for anyone. There wouldn't be the whole despicable slut-shaming thing. There wouldn't be people trying to control the reproductive rights of women. Sex workers wouldn't be vilified. And actually sex workers wouldn't be predominantly one gender or sex. It would probably be equal opportunity, depending on what the demand is, because there'd be less sense of entitlement to sex with another person, so sex work would theoretically be more equal opportunity for genders and whatever configuration of actual body the person has. So, and part of the construction for TSU is I also added in the idea that the Aramanan species, TSU isn't about humans, at least not till way later in the series. Their primary main characters are aliens. So, of course, then I can tweak things. Like, for example, giving them a third sex. And making it so that a certain sequence of events has to happen for them to make babies. You can't, unless you're a hermaphrodite, you can't make a baby accidentally. So you can orgasm and have sex and enjoy sex and not have a risk of making babies unless you want to, or there's sort of someone gets a bit carried away, or both get a bit carried away. So you have an equal choice to make babies with any and all partners, and any and all partners have to actually consent and flick the switch in the brain or whatever to choose to become fertile for that moment to have babies. So it immediately levels everything. Because if you both have to choose to have a child, you're also both equally responsible for the child once it's born. And you generally know that it's going to happen. So the other part of the construction for TSU was that because there's no gendered shame, there's no gendered enslavement, there's no slurs. Gendered slurs, I mean. You can't, for example, insult a dude by calling him a woman, because it's not shameful to be a woman, so why would it be used as an insult? And because there's no history of selling woman, or, there's no possession there, there's no entitlement, sexual entitlement or objectification, you don't get words like the C word or the B word for woman. There's no words that turn someone into only a sexual plaything or a breeding object. So I had to take all of those words or possible words out, which is why I've created a bunch of swear words, not a lot, but some, to replace them with. The actual gendered words were the hardest because you have to sort of know the meaning of each of the terrible words and then figure out what would happen in its place if that didn't happen. So the gendered or so-called gendered swear words in Ranka, that's akena, akenan, and aken. Aken. It's all the same word with a gendered suffix to gender it, to make it a noun that's male or female or androgen. And the base of the meaning of the word means nothing. As in, you are nothing. You are not a person. You are not one of us. You're not a living being, essentially. So it's as objectifying as or dehumanizing as possible without having like a history of oppression and slavery, essentially. As the history, like it's not about gendered violence, it's just that a person is telling another person that they're nothing or dehumanized, but not because of their gender, but because they're just an asshole. So there's all these sort of tweaky designs that are took a lot of thought and a lot of designing and a lot of going back and fixing. I'm still doing that, actually. The biggest going back and fixing was the word preta, which I wanted to have a replacement. I started off with swear words. I wanted to have a replacement word for things like calling someone a dickhead or a knobhead. I like the sound of knobhead. It's kind of neat, but probably not a good meaning. But those sorts of terms, all about phallic objects. And so I chose preta, which pareta is the word for cucumber in Ranka, because cucumbers, phallic objects. Here is the awkward reference to sex. And then I realised that it's, even though men aren't oppressed for their gender and or sex, it's still a gendered slur, or could potentially be a gendered slur, depending on your definition of the word slur. But it was still a gendered violence, even without the power differential. And so I had to go back and go, okay, it's still pareta. Pareta is still a cucumber. So how do I change the story to make it less gendered, or less about genitals? And so I had to go back and make it, the story is that this cucumber plant climbs up a wall, and the cucumber only grows at the top, the highest part of the tree, of the vine, and so when they are ripe and they drop, they smash. So it makes them really difficult as a crop plant, as in to eat. You have to set up nets to catch them or whatever. So that the story matched the feeling I was trying to get. Was, you call someone a knobhead because they're an idiot. Like, there's another word that's difficult. I'm having a lot of trouble learning about ableism. But the idea is that there's this person who's perfectly able to be logical, perfectly able to think clearly and have critical reasoning and good common sense, and they're not. They just need a good slap across the face. And all the words that we use for that kind of person is discriminatory towards people with developmental issues, or with low intelligence, or because our society defines intelligence as a good thing and not intelligence as a bad thing. So there's the crossover with sexism and ableism. And I wanted to try to avoid the ableism while still holding on to the original feeling, which is you telling someone who should know better that they're either being really obnoxious or obtuse. They're just not getting something. And you just kind of want to slap them and go, use your brain. But in a way that's not at all discriminatory. Not using the terms that we would use, that come up in my brain because that's how I grew up, to replace that frustration with someone who should know better, or is just being obnoxious, without using those potentially slur words on either side of the swear word sort of scale. So Pareta took about a year to figure out what to do and to explore, and it was about the same time I found out that words for low intelligence were actually ableist. I'm trying to figure out a way around it, and I hope it's worked, but I'm trying. And pareta is, I mean, calling someone a cucumber is actually kind of funny. It still makes me grin. I'm not entirely sure why it's funny. I should probably analyse that later. But I'm still going back, as I said, to edit these things to try and make them better. Some things I can't change, but others I can. And pareta was actually, or preta, was actually part of the Rise of Hawk re-edit for 2nd edition. So, going from there. Okay, we're almost done. I'll stop, hopefully, talking relatively soon. So, the next part of the idea of a world without sexism is that one of my pet hates in this world is that clothes are really, really gendered. And my pet hate part is that men's clothes are boring. Have you ever tried to find colourful men's shirts? It's impossible. This is about as colourful as I can get in men's shirts. Or brown. And that's because colour and shape and decoration, like lace or nice materials or velvet or all of these elements of style of clothes are associated with women, as in feminine clothes in our culture. And so men are basically relegated to wearing a similar palette, shirt and pants or shirt and shorts, sometimes t-shirts, but like it's so limited. If you go into the men's clothes department area, the clothes will be made of a much higher quality material and they will fit better generally, but they're all blues and greens and browns and whites and greys and very boring, not colourful, not flashy, not sparkly, not soft, not any of those wondrous things that are amazing about women's clothes. And women's clothes are like the polar opposite. It's all frills and all colour and all, pretty with little doodly bits, and there's no sort of blurring in the middle other than work clothes, obviously. And if you took away the idea that men being feminine is shameful and that women have to wear these clothes and men have to wear these clothes, everyone can wear whatever the hell they want. If clothes are not gendered, men can go out and wear dresses if they want and not get teased and not get abused or beaten up or whatever. And women can wear suits and not get yelled at and all the other sort of slurs and stuff that get associated with women wearing so-called men's clothing. Everyone would be free to wear whatever they wanted to wear. Now, another part which I'll go further on into the when I do transphobia later on in another video, is the only bit that's gendered is where the waistline is, or the sash. They've got it's like a belt. In their formal robes, their formal clothing is kind of like a kimono but mixed with sort of Victorian-y type style clothes. And they have the sash, the obi. And for women, people who want to identify as women, or for society to identify them as women, the obi sash, the top of it is high, like under the armpits or under the breastline. For androgen, it's right across the middle of the stomach. And for men, it's low on the hips or on the waist, depending on which body you've got. Apart from the sash or the visual waistline, there is no other gendering of clothes. So a man can walk up the street in high heel shoes and makeup, like full drag, but with a low waistline or a low sash on his hips, and he will still be gendered male by everyone else. Because in their culture, gender is assigned by the person, not by society. And the person expresses their gender with a sash. It just saves having to do pronouns every time you meet someone. because most people, they try and do things efficiently, and it would, in my head, it's quite a lot of fuss to always say, hi, I'm so and so, my pronouns are blah. It's good if you've got neo pronouns, because you can't put on a sash, Zazim, or although Zazim is part of TSU, but in real life you can't sort of always make it obvious what your specific pronouns are. So if you've got a visual way of expressing it, then you don't have to constantly introduce yourself with your pronouns. And I'm probably going to get yelled at for that one. It's just my idea. But the thing is, when clothes and hair and makeup and shoes and all of those sort of self-expression things aren't gendered, that gives everyone more choices. You could wear whatever you want. Clothes would be designed for sort of like body shape. So instead of having sizes, you'd have sizes, but you'd have sizes with, wide shoulders, or sizes with broad across the chest, or, like they may even, well, in the spacefaring part of TSU, they would just make clothes for the body, for the individual person's body. There wouldn't be mass-produced clothes. Everyone would have clothes that fitted them. Everyone would have clothes that they liked, that expressed who they are. Or at least, the people with resources. The rebels have wet rags, but they're a different situation. Also, if no one is told what to wear, or how to hold their hair, or what shoes to wear, or whether they're allowed to have nail polish or makeup or whatever, if no one's strictly enforcing how they present themselves based on their gender, people can be themselves. They can express their religion without being yelled at. People with different kinds of hair, like I've noticed, I've tried to do quite a bit of research on things like non-white hair can be very, it can behave differently depending on which racial group people are attached to. And then people can just have their hair. If you've got big boofy hair, you've got big boofy hair. And you can put it up how you want without people going, your hair's boofy. Like, there's none of that sort of criticism of how people look, as long as they're not butt naked, although that could be me being a prude, I don't know. People can express who they are, be who they are, as they choose, regardless of gender, sex, or gender expression. There wouldn't be a gender expression in TSU because people just wear what they like. They wear the colours and the material and the patterns and the sparkly bits and whatever. There's no, I'm not going to have that because only girls do that. Little boys can enjoy having their nails done or whatever, And it's freedom. Freedom is the core for me, I think. Freedom and choice. And it gives people the space to be themselves, to be comfortable in their own bodies, regardless of what their bodies look like, or what our world would say their body means. And also, if no one's required to look pretty, because a lot of women, or everyone, women are demanded by society to look pretty, to look hot, to look beautiful, to basically be a piece of art that everyone looks at. If that's not expected of you, then you can just enjoy your body and clothes and stuff. And you can be slumpy. Asha would not be caught dead in formal anything. She's definitely a pants and t-shirt kind of person. And it's perfectly fine. Everyone is fine with that. They don't care. It's just what she wears. She'll probably wear military fatigues for the rest of her life if, she wasn't required by something else, like formal proceedings or something. So when they're not pretty, it's just freedom. Freedom to be yourself. And so the upside, or the sort of extension of that freedom to be yourself, is that there's no assumption of what kind of person you are, what you're interested in, what whether you're passive or aggressive or loud or quiet, or there's no requirement to behave in a particular way. Women don't have to be passive. They don't have to be nice and talk with a little voice. I can't actually talk with a high voice anymore, which is amusing. So people would grow up and men would be allowed to cry. Men would be allowed to be vulnerable. Men would be allowed to be comforted. Women would be able to do the same, and women would be allowed to be strong, be allowed to be leaders without being accused of being bossy or all the other stupid things people say. And there still may come out tendencies. People who we would assign female at birth could still possibly have a tendency towards certain behaviours, certain interests. But it wouldn't be enforced, it wouldn't be programmed by society so that people can be themselves. And this concept I've applied to the characters. So the first character you meet in Rise of Hawk is Asha Khan. She's strong, she's kick-ass, like literally she could kick your ass. Actually, she's pretty much one of the few rebels who could kick Hawk's ass, and that's saying something. She's strong and powerful. She's a strong female character. But she's also vulnerable. She's also afraid. She's also a very good mum, a loving mum, a kind person. She's herself. So she's strong and kick-ass, but not a caricature, you know. The problem with having those boxes of gender is that often characters in books, particularly famous books, they just become caricatures. They're just paintings, just stereotypes. And I've tried really hard to create characters who are people, and who react to trauma and pain and grief like people, instead of the gendered stereotypes that we have. She deals with grief by getting physical. She'll punch things and break things and throw potted plants at agents, and when she's afraid she gets angry. She hides her fear under aggression or sarcasm, or just doing some training or whatever. So she's got a lot of those sort of what we would traditionally call masculine values, masculine traits, but she's also got a lot of feminine traits. So she's a mother and protective and vulnerable and strong, and so she's a new sort of, or for me, a new sort of strong female character. That trope. She's a rework of it to try and be a person rather than a caricature. The next person you meet, main character that you meet anyway, is Talon, her big brother. Talon Khan. He can be strong and he can also kick ass occasionally, but he's also peaceful and kind and loves to help people, and so he blurs the line as well of our gendered stereotypes. And it's important because we have this idea that there's only like two kind of men, the strong men and the wimpy men. And in those two boxes, I am definitely the wimpy man. I mean, even if I was strong in other areas, people would still immediately assume I'm a wimpy man because I was assigned female at birth. But the thing is, that's not what people are. Women aren't all that stereotype, and men aren't all that stereotype. We don't fit in boxes. We're all unique. Talon's lost a lot, and he's been alone as well. He could have chosen to join the rebels, but he didn't at first, because he didn't want to fight. He didn't want to hurt people. But then throughout the story, he ends up choosing to fight, choosing to help Hawke. And his sensitivity, his not wanting to fight, doesn't make him any less masculine. It just makes him Talon. And the next person you meet is Nalana. The main characters. I'm only mentioning main characters because in Rise of Hawke, like, about 3/4 of the not main characters die, so, you know, it's not important to talk about them anyway. But Nala is young. She's 15 at the beginning, but she's sensitive and kind and gentle. She fulfills a lot of the what we would call feminine woman. You know, she's a girly girl, if you know what I mean. Although I think she'd still slap someone if they tried to make her wear pink. She'll wear what she likes, damn it. But as it just illustrated, she's also pretty kick-ass. You know, she isn't a combatant, but she stands up for herself verbally. So she's also strong. There's a blurring. And the other side of that is Nama, who's the fourth main character in the first book. He would be what most people would say were traditionally hyper-masculine ideas. He's strong, he's proud, he's a leader. He leads very well. He punches people, shoots people. You know, he's very sort of superhero, you know, main protagonist kind of person. But he also hurts. He's lost so much of his family to the agency. And so there are moments in the story, I don't know if it's Rise of Hawke, but further on in the story, you know, he wails when he loses someone. He mourns them. He's sensitive and loving and adorable with kids. Totally adorable with kids. And those are traits that we would associate with femininity, even though he's about as manly as you get in my TV series. Not TV series, my book series. And it's all four of these characters show illustrations of our stereotypes and how they can meld, how they can mush together and not actually be a singular box that people fit into. And that, to me, is fighting sexism. Because sexism is about a lack of choices. It's about the assumptions that people make about who you are, what you're allowed to be, what you're allowed to do, the choices you make or you're allowed to make. It's about limited choices. And feminism, to me, countering sexism, is opening up those choices, opening up those boxes, those definitions of what is and is not male or female. And all the varieties of gender that come in that spectrum of gender. If we open it up, it's not about losing gender, it's about finding more gender. Because our identities our gendered identities aren't strictly one thing. You know, all the cisgender men who aren't buffy and, you know, punch people and, you know, the hyper-masculine sort of image, all the men that aren't like that, all the cisgender men aren't like that, they're still men. Society still calls them men. I mean, usually they're still oppressed and, well, not oppressed, but teased and bullied and beaten up and all that other stuff, but they're still considered men. So there has to be part of masculinity, part of gender, that isn't those stereotypes. And we can learn that. You can be a woman and not want children. You can be a woman and not have breasts. You can be a woman and not be able to have babies. Femininity, womanhood is bigger, is more than just your body or your role in society or what you wear, what you say. There's something inherent about gender that has nothing to do with all of those stereotypes and all those boxes and labels and ideas that society tries to inflict on people to make them comply. And if in TSU I've tried to sort of break those boxes apart and just let the characters be who they are, and thereby allowing readers the permission, if they want, to be who they are, regardless of all of the noise that they probably get from society. A man should be able to wear a pink tutu and not get beaten up. Should be able to have shiny nails or wear lovely materials or enjoy hanging out with his own kids and not get beaten up because he's not manly enough. A woman should be allowed to not want kids and not get punished for it. A woman should be able to say, no, I don't want to have sex with you, and not get punished because the other person thinks that they're entitled to her body. You know, it's all about freedom and about choices and opening it up. And in the process of trying to create an open, at least within sexism, an open fictional universe, I've tried to use it as a mental experiment to explore what that would look like if it was here. If we didn't have such strict definitions of gender and enforced them really badly, really strictly and horribly, what would society perhaps look like? I don't know if I've done it right, but it's been fun, and I'm still learning. And we've got to the end of my paper, which is good because it's almost an hour. I guess the summary of this particular video is that if you try to imagine a world without a bigotry, it's a big thing. It's a big exploration because you have to explore the bigotry in your world first, and the implications of it, before you can create a world without it or with minimal. There's bound to be stuff in there that could come off as stereotypical or whatever. But one can only do things with what they have, with the resources they have. But it's interesting and fun, and it opens the door for different expressions of gender being seen. They need to be seen, all of these different expressions of gender, and both performative and just identity. If you can see the representation of it in fiction, or at least an attempt at it, you can then put those ideas into your head and take them with you and explore your own gender, your own identity, your own expressions. And then when everyone is doing that, society changes. But you have to have a story, you have to have a way of framing it so that other people can see it too. So this representation, this deliberate trying to take out sexism from a fictional universe, or just create a fictional universe without it, isn't just about the characters and making a universe where people can be safe and find sanctuary and find room for themselves. It's also giving people who would never imagine this something to imagine, something to challenge their mind, challenge their ideas about what's possible, what what it could look like without sexism. And that's obviously an aspiration, not a guarantee. But it's a nice idea, a nice concept to chew on, to think through and explore and then apply to yourself. I mean, if you were free to wear whatever the heck you wanted, and there was no societal backlash, no teasing, no friends laughing, no cops coming up and locking you up because they think you're someone dodgy, none of that, no oppression whatsoever. You could walk out the door wearing whatever the heck you want, even nakedness. Some people like nakedness. What would it be? You know, what would you wear? I have a friend who really loves steampunk, and she said that if society didn't worry about what she wore, she'd wear steampunk 24/7. She would just wear it all the time. There's another lady on YouTube, I believe, she does a channel, and she pretty much wears, I think it's Victorian, but period dresses with corsets and everything. Whenever she's not working, she's wearing period dresses because that's her thing. Imagine what the world would look like if everyone wore their thing without worrying, without getting any negative reactions, without getting any bullies or abusive people. What would you wear? And what would that mean? And how would you express that? And it opens so many interesting doors, and even just knowing what your answer is interesting. And knowing that you don't know the answer. Because if you don't know the answer, that means you don't actually wear what you want to wear. And there's a part of you that might know the answer to that, but you're not connected to that part of you. The psychology and the other consequences of this exercise is fascinating and fun, and I hope one day to watch the result of that question being asked. Anyway, I have been talking for a solid hour. I hope that was interesting and I didn't ramble too much. I will hopefully see you next week. Aranitasa.